All right, welcome back. Let's get me in focus. All right, so we are meeting back at slide 12 right now and thinking more about us versus them, and thinking first about symbols. Symbols are a quick visual way that we can think about belonging or lack thereof. Think about, when we all wear slew gear, but if somebody out there is wearing a Wash U shirt, we know they don't belong here. Get back a couple miles west. You're not from here. Similarly, sports. The second you see somebody with an opposing sports jersey on, I've seen people just get visceral about it. And I'm sure that you all have your own stories about this as well. But symbols help us to have a feeling of belonging and to also push people away who are not part of our group. This goes back into the idea of using the way in which we dress as a means of identification. And symbols also are a way to get loyalty through that identification that can be used by all members of that group. And the symbols form their own life in a way. So think of the American flag and how there are definitely very strong feelings of patriotism in the United States toward the flag. And if the flag is stepped on or burnt or anything like that, there are often very visceral reactions by people to that type of desecration. And that happens to a lot of different symbols that carry meanings larger than themselves, where that attack of the symbol becomes an attack on the group. So we see this all over the world with different types of symbols because of what it represents. Your textbook has lots of different examples of this. I also know that you can think of examples in your own life where a symbol meant something. And also, when you saw an opposing symbol, there was some type of reaction, whether that was the opposing high school in your hometown, or whether it's a religious symbol or something like that, where you automatically know that there's an in-group and out-group. So moving on to slide 13, this is about the Implicit Association Test. This is about knowing your own in-group and out-group bias. I have a link here within the slide to a video about it. Of course, you can also take these tests online, especially about race. So you can make very rapid judgments about race in association with different words, usually good words and bad words. And the reaction time for how you respond helps to show kind of your own biases. So the idea is, do you view your own in-group as good and the out-group as bad, and show proper reaction times, fitting reaction times when that's congruent? So bad words are with that out-group, good words are with your in-group. And does your reaction time slow down when it becomes incongruent? So bad words are with your in-group and good words are with your out-group, because that causes kind of a disconnect. So that's what the Implicit Association Test is measuring. So I have a question for you guys about what factors might influence performance on this test. That's something for you guys to kind of think about. What is a person's background that might affect how they perform on this? Somebody's exposure to different people? Think of how that could be an effect. So moving on to slide 14. So we're still, on this track of thinking about how our verbal working memory is what's allowing us to do all of this, what's allowing us to visually see something and then start to make these judgment calls pretty quickly to start categorizing somebody and lead us to thinking, whether we like them or not, before we even have a chance to know them. And the capacity to do this is very unique. I mean, it's uniquely human. And it's uniquely human because it allows us to fight each other for reasons that other animals do not have. Other animals are going to fight each other often on reactionary instances. They're reacting to something. It may not make sense to us because they may also be reacting to things like territorial, hormonal disputes, things like that. But they don't have hatred for each other based off of instant judgments that they see where they're placing people into schemas that are based off of preconceived notions of an out-group. It's way too complex. But humans are able to do this and then wage violence on each other. This is especially pertinent when you start to think about the after effects of World War I and then all through World War II. We see this in many different wars. Moving on to slide 15, another thing to think about is the fundamental attribution error. And this is where we tend to think that people's behavior is something that's permanent about them. That, they're unchanging factors. And then we tend to think that our behavior is due to very specific circumstances. And that we can make all kinds of different decisions, but that person who made a decision that we didn't like, it's just because they're a bad person. Like Elmer, who never buries his poop, that's just because he's a bad cat. It's not because he doesn't fit in the litter box well because he's huge. No, he's just a bad cat. No, but this is when, I've offended him. He's leaving now. But this is the idea that we tend to give ourselves a lot more leeway in the decisions that we make, but we don't give the same benefit of a doubt to others. Interesting. And this is a characteristic of the interpreter because we understand our own mind so well. We're constantly in it. We're constantly speaking to ourselves and understanding our motivations and why we did the things we did. But we don't have that same insight into what other people are doing. And so we make this fundamental attribution error where we start to think, well, they did that thing because, it's just their personality. It's just their gender. It's just their ethnicity. It's just everyone of their religion. It's just X. And it's a very human thing to do to blame their group membership for why they did something rather than the circumstances that they were in. And we fail to think about the external world. I'll give you an example that I often think of in my own life is that I get really paranoid while driving. That if I accidentally make the slightest error while driving, that somebody will see me as the driver. Like if I accidentally cut somebody off or something, and they'll think that I'm a bad driver because I'm a hijabi. They'll just think, well, all Muslims are bad drivers then, rather than just thinking that I just accidentally made an error because, I don't know, traffic was really heavy or something. So I fear the fundamental attribution error because of knowing about it. But at the same time, knowing about it also means that we have a responsibility to try not to perpetuate it. So I have to give myself reminders that we don't know what's going on in other people's minds for why they make the decisions that they make. And sometimes this is very difficult to do because we want to blame it on their personality. We want to say they're just a selfish person, or, you know, they're just whatever you want to fill in the blank with. And it's because of who we are as humans that we want to do this. But we have to understand that there is so much going on in the world that we don't also understand that is feeding into their motivations, just like it is feeding into ours. And we have to give the benefit of a doubt. So when we return in the next mini lecture, we'll be on slide 16, slide 16 is just a little comic about fundamental attribution error. When we come back, we will continue on slide 17, which are some questions for you to kind of think about. So go ahead and take a look at slide 17. I'll have these questions up in the discussion board as well, and then we'll move on from there.